Welcome to Legal Talk. This is Robin Bond. And as you know, my wheelhouse is the world of work, representing employees in severance and employment agreement negotiations and discrimination claims, navigating conflicts at work. And the pace of change in employment law is absolutely dizzying. As I thought we'd start the show today with just a few highlights of some things that are going on here in Pennsylvania, and then we'll move on to some other topics. The Pennsylvania House has just recently passed a bill, 1825, that would require employers to pass anti-discrimination and anti-harassment guidance. This is important because the EEOC has recently rescinded its guidance. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. The other thing going on is a $28.5 million no poach lawsuit settlement that's going on between two major healthcare entities in central Pennsylvania. And that would be Geisinger Medical and Evangelical Community Hospital. It's central Pennsylvania. There aren't a lot of other employers there. And the significance of this anti-poaching means that these two employers colluded with each other to say, I won't hire your employees if you won't hire mine. Well, you know, the employees have no idea this is going on, but the effect of that is to depress their wages because there's no other place for them to work, limit the ability of patients to have access to healthcare providers, and really significantly impede a healthcare worker's ability to find another job in the area should they lose their employment at another place. So this is a very significant settlement, $28.5 million. And please keep in mind, if you ever become aware this is going on, that's not a legal practice here or anywhere. Another few things going on. We have Philadelphia has required sick leave, paid sick leave, starting in 2026. If your employer has 15 or more employees, they have to give you 72 hours of paid sick time a year. Fewer than 15, it would be 48 hours of paid sick time. That's, significant improvement. And then my final topic for today is on minimum wage. Believe it or not, there's a bill trying to raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour in rural areas and $15 an hour in urban areas. It's hard to believe that has not yet happened, but it hasn't. So you might want to watch the progression of these things as the year goes on. Certainly, you can always go to the news section of my website to read more about these things. And we will try to keep you aware of other developments affecting the world of work as the year progresses here on Legal Talk. So the matters I just mentioned can cause economic and other injuries, emotional injuries to employees at work. But today we're going to focus on a different kind of injury, and that is those that happen when you least expect it, like via an accident. And my guest today is attorney David Lever. David is the founder and senior partner of a personal injury firm, Lever Ecker in New York. He has been advocating for the rights of injured individuals since 1990. So that's a lot of great years of experience. For anyone who's ever been in an accident or known someone who has been in an accident, you understand that these situations can be life-altering, if not catastrophic. And you never know when you or someone you know will need such an advocate. So welcome, David. Welcome.
Thank you, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners.
Good. Well, we have some great questions to get to, David, and we are going to head that way. But first, we have a viewer question. So if we could put that up on the screen, let's see what that question is. Our question is from Andrea Bowman in Philadelphia, who says, I read that the EEOC abolished its anti-harassment guidance, and what does that mean for me in my case? Well, it's a good question. As you know, I had mentioned a little bit about this earlier. In January, the newly appointed under this new administration, commissioners of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission decided to abolish some well-established guidelines that they had for, how do we determine discrimination, workplace harassment. And these guidance included things from the Me Too movement and things from a recent case, the Bostock case, that expanded protections into gender identity, and LGBTQ issues. So this has all been abolished. But the important thing to remember, Andrea, is the EEOC is an administrative agency. So administrative guidance on what they can or can't do has been abolished, but the laws have not changed. The underlying laws are still there. So that doesn't change your right to pursue your case or to file your claims if you haven't yet filed one. All right. What it means is that there's not standardized guidance for evaluating the cases, but many states like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, they all have, Massachusetts, whatever, they have state human relations commissions. And a lot of times the laws under the state commission are very favorable to employees. So my suggestion to you is, if you've already filed your claim, consult with your lawyer as to what you need to do. If you haven't yet filed a claim, before you do so, before you go to the EEOC, or even before you file something internally with your company, please consult an employment lawyer in your area where you live to find out, do you have a claim and what's the best way to put that claim forward. So I hope that was helpful. If you other viewers have a question, here's how to submit questions to Money Matters TV.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Welcome back. Having David here today is very meaningful to me, as I recently had a car accident experience. Very, very, very minor, of course, but with all the snow in the roads, I'm minding my own business, driving to the mall in the middle lane, not bothering anybody, not seeing anything. And all of a sudden I hear a crash, and here a young driver has moved into my car. And I said, did you not see me? And she said, well, there was snow in my lane. I had to move over, right? So, this was no big deal, fortunately for me, but it made me think, as we were going to talk, what if it had been a big deal? What if this had happened to me and all of a sudden I was the victim of some life-altering or catastrophic thing? Bam, something in my life could really change. So I'd like to talk to David about what every injury victim should know before filing a legal claim, because, when I'm sitting there waiting for the police, I'm thinking, gee, do I even know what to do? And I'm a lawyer, right? So let's start at the beginning, David. If somebody is hurt in an accident, what is the first thing they should do, even before they call a lawyer? What should they do?
Well, the absolute first thing that a person should do if they're injured is seek immediate medical attention, because if, God forbid, it's life-threatening or more serious than a person realizes, they want to make sure that they can be seen, even if it's an EMT, or get right to a hospital, just to make sure that you're okay. Because I can't tell you how often I've seen people that get in accidents and they act as if they're going to be okay, and then they realize afterwards that they're not. The other thing I always tell people to do is report an accident, because many cases, if someone is injured and there's no record of the accident, it becomes an uphill battle to prove what happened, where it happened, when it happened, how it happened. So most importantly, seek immediate medical attention. The other thing I always tell people to do, and I don't give medical advice, of course, but I tell them, make sure you tell the doctor everything that hurts you, because sometimes it's not the first thing you're thinking about that's the most significant. And giving a medical professional all of the information, I think, is the best thing you can do to give yourself a chance to hopefully get treatment you need so you can be okay, and then you can move on, God willing, with the rest of your life to get back to work, get back to family, get back to school, and be okay.
Yeah, thank you. So it is a good idea to call the police and get a police report, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because many times, for example, there could be a car accident with you're a driver in a car and somebody hits you and there's no police. And then you find out that the other driver didn't report the accident to their insurance company. But more importantly, the stories may shift. So, for example, if the police come to the scene, I'd like to think you have a much better chance of having an honest representation of what happened in the police report.
That's good. Yeah, and police can also see it. So you are emphasizing, okay, not only that, so we did the right thing, called the police. The other thing is the medical documentation. So you've said that can sort of make or break the case here. So what kind of records or communications are you talking about? Is anything specific we should know or ask when we see the doctor?
I would say absolutely. So if you are injured in an accident and you go to a doctor, you make sure, of course, to tell the doctor everything that is hurting you. This way, it gives the doctor, first and foremost, an opportunity to try to help you, to diagnose what may be going on. But also, it creates a contemporaneous record of what your complaints are.
Right.
There are many cases where someone's in an accident and they have an adrenaline rush, it's fight or flight, and they say, no, I think I'm okay, and they go home, and then they wake up the next day and they feel like they got hit by a ton of bricks.
Right.
And so if you get to a doctor, you can prove that you made the complaints. If you're home crying yourself to sleep on a couch, maybe someone believes you, maybe they won't, but without a record, it just makes it a much more challenging effort to try to prove that you've been injured in an accident.
I think that would probably be my first reaction. I probably say, no, I'm fine. And I think a lot of people do that. And then they're like, oh my God, I'm really not fine. Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like, let's just say I did live in denial, wake up and feel like a truck hit me. I could still go to the ER, or I could still get medical care. Right. I mean, that wouldn't preclude me from going and getting care. Right.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are many times that people don't go to an emergency room on the day of their accident. It doesn't mean that they're not injured. No. But if they're not feeling well, it's important that they follow up as soon as possible. Because if someone has an accident and then they go to work for the next week and they're in pain, but there's no medical documentation or any indication that someone is injured, if they come to someone like me and they say, okay, David, can you take my case? Depending on the facts, I may tell them yes, but other times I might say it may be too hard to connect the dots. In other words,
the old superseding intervening force, right? From torts, there could be some superseding intervening force.
Exactly.
So, not only do we sometimes fear contacting the doctor or saying that we're hurt, but sometimes we're afraid to contact a lawyer, and we think, oh, it's too soon, or it's just too small, or it's not insignificant. So help us tell our viewers when to know to reach out to an attorney like you for help, or at least a consultation.
Well, when someone calls a personal injury lawyer like myself, there's no charge for the consultation. The way I work on cases, I work on a contingency fee basis, which means that I only make money if I recover for my client. So it doesn't cost potential claimants anything to reach out to someone like me or some other lawyer that they might know, of course, and learn what their rights are. Because if you don't reach out to a lawyer, it's very possible that you're not going to know what your rights and potential obligations might be. So I always tell people to contact me when something happens, because I can give them information and I can educate them. And the main thing about that is if you give people information and you educate them, then they can make the decision that's best for them and their family based on what they're experiencing and going through.
That's good.
The other thing, Robin,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The other thing I can say to you is by speaking with an attorney, it may help somebody who would otherwise be contacted by an insurance company. Insurance companies are in business to make money, okay? Which I don't think is a surprise to anyone. So when someone is in an accident, I always tell people it's beneficial for them to speak to someone like me before they speak to the insurance company, because the insurance company, and I'm not necessarily indicating that they're evil, of course, but they're looking for information to help mitigate their damages.
Of course. So, in other words, here, I'll give you 20 grand when maybe if you really had legal representation, you could get, 10, 20 times that. So, well, yeah, I appreciate
it's even worse. There are insurance companies in New York, and I know elsewhere, I'm not going to mention names, but they will literally go to a claimant and give them like $750 and say, hey, just sign here.
Oh my God.
And then they call me and they say, oh, I signed something. And we're like, did you realize you were signing a general release? Now, there may be ways to get around that.
You bust that, yeah. But then you have to go through the process of busting the release, right?
It's not an ideal situation.
No. And I think most people, see the ads on TV about these big settlements and quick payouts. And, what are some of these myths and false expectations that you see injury victims fall for on that side? I mean, we've discussed how you can fall for the $750 check, but what about the other side of the equation?
Well, when someone comes to me, I never tell them this is how much I'm going to get you, because there's a lot of information that I don't know initially. I may not know the extent of the injuries. I don't know what their injuries are going to mean over time. Are they going to need to be under doctor's care for an extended period of time? Are they going to be disabled from work? Will they ever get back to work? What type of medical expenses may they have in the future? So there are some people that think just because they've had an accident that they're going to receive a lot of money. But really, for an insurance company to settle a case for a great deal of money, a lawyer on behalf of a client has to be able to prove that the injuries are serious and warrant that. I can tell you that insurance companies are not in the business of giving away money just because. Yeah. And candidly, if insurance companies were fair, I would be doing something else, because people wouldn't need someone like me to advocate for their rights.
Let me ask you this. Like, sometimes I see, well, what are the policy limits? Do you see, the policy limit is X, I don't know, $1 million, but you think the damages are provable to a greater extent in court. Do you think it's possible to settle that claim in excess of policy limits, or to get in excess of policy limits, do you typically see you have to go to trial to do that?
Well, I would say in most cases, you're pretty much limited to the parameters of insurance. Now, if it's a motor vehicle accident case, in New York State, for example, a driver only has to have $25,000 of bodily injury liability coverage per person. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen people come to my office with catastrophic or very severe injuries, and there's just not enough insurance to compensate them. There are times, of course, when you have a commercial vehicle that may cause the accident, and in most cases, that'll mean that there's a business to protect, so there will be substantial insurance. But to answer your question, there have been times where we've gotten a defendant to contribute to a settlement out of pocket, but it doesn't happen too often, because, number one, in order to force a defendant to have to pay, you have to go through a trial. You have to get a verdict that you hope is favorable and over the policy limits. And then you have to enter judgment and then try to collect. Generally speaking, most people that I see that have assets have adequate insurance to protect them. There are times where we deal with insurance companies and they don't make a good faith offer, and we have to take a verdict on a case. We have, in certain cases, one recently, which we had in federal court in New York, where the defendant's insurance company didn't really protect their insured, and they had to contribute over and above what the policy limits were to get the case settled.
Jeez. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about, honesty and transparency here, because, we're talking about those concepts here. When you're talking to doctors and other lawyers, how can small inconsistencies in what you said, like, how can that hurt the case? 'Cause we talked about that, like what you originally might say to the police in the police report, and then that message changes later. So how does that hurt a case?
Well, consistency is very important. So if a person goes to a doctor, for example, and they say, I hurt my neck, doctor might ask, have you ever injured your neck in the past? And they may say no. However, they may have had an accident 10 years earlier where they injured their neck. So that inconsistency becomes a major issue because now it looks as if you're trying to hide something.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be consistent, to tell a doctor that you're seeing if you've had prior injuries, because just because someone maybe injured their neck in the past, it doesn't mean that if they have another accident where they re-injure themselves, that there's nothing that can be done. What we look at in cases like that would be, is there an interval change in the type of injury that a person has? Like maybe they had a sprain the first time and now maybe the second time there's a herniated disc. So you can show through medical evidence that there's a big difference.
Huh. Well, let's talk about some of the evidence, because I remember very vividly the day in the life of videos that are often played to the jury to demonstrate here's what the person was like before the accident. Now look at what the person is like after the accident. So in your experience, what type of proof is the most compelling, either in court or during settlement? Is it, photos, witness statements, expert reports? What really turns the tide here?
Well, I think photos, I think video recording, whether it's a day in the life, you can have before and after, for example. Witness testimony is very important. The testimony of experts is very important because as a lawyer, I can't prove medically exactly what the injury is. We need a doctor that has a medical degree to be able to testify as to what the injury is, so that evidence becomes available for the jury to consider. I actually like the fact that there are a lot of video cameras these days, because if an accident happens, for example, and it's favorable to my client, I can prove it. If it turns out that there's video that shows the opposite, well, then I know that that's not a matter that I want to pursue.
Yeah.
In all likelihood.
Yeah, right. And they don't want to pursue it either. I mean, what's the point of wasting years and time doing that? That's, so like if you say, I'm sure like I get a lot of calls, but I can't take every case. So what separates in your mind a strong claim from one that struggles to gain traction? Maybe it's the videos, or what do you think?
Well, the first thing we look at is, what is the liability? In other words, whose fault is the accident? So if someone comes to me and they say, well, I went through a red light, then of course I might say to them, well, I can't help you because under the law, you would be responsible for causing the accident. So we always look at liability. Then we look at the person's injuries and damages. So what does that mean for them? Someone could say that they have a back injury, but if they're out playing football every Sunday, it's very hard to be able to substantiate that. So everyone is different. You look at quantitative things, you look at qualitative things that impact the person's life. But in terms of what helps to make a strong case, objective findings of injury are helpful. So for example, and I don't wish it on anyone, but let's say someone is in an accident, they trip and fall, they put their arm out, they break their arm, they need surgery. It's not too hard to prove that that person has a serious injury, because you can look at an x-ray, you can look at maybe a deformity on someone, you can and you can look at limitations that that person has. Certain injuries are very clear because you can see that either by looking at a person or by looking at an x-ray or a CAT scan or MRI. And there are other injuries where people's problems are all on the inside. And that's where, like, seeing the doctor is important. So if someone again says they hurt their back, but they're not seeing the doctor, it's very hard to convince somebody that that's a serious injury.
So I think you've given us some really good tips here. So if you were going to basically give us a final recap here for viewers watching right now who maybe feel intimidated or uncertain, what's your message to them about taking the first step towards handling their own accident and getting the recovery that they may deserve?
Okay, what I would tell anyone who is injured in an accident, it's very important, as I said before, to seek medical attention. It's important to report an accident. And it's very important to speak to a lawyer, because a lawyer can indicate to a person whether he or she feels that there is a good faith basis to proceed with the claim. What I don't recommend people do is speaking with insurance companies directly,
Right.
because they may say something in response to a question that can be misconstrued and be used against them. Of course, I'm not suggesting that anyone shouldn't tell the truth. Of course, everyone should tell the truth when they speak to others. But there are certain questions that an insurance company may ask a person that I, as a lawyer, would say, you don't have to answer that question. There may come a time where you have to answer that at a deposition or potentially at a trial, but insurance companies will tend to take advantage of people when they can. So what I would say is, if a person feels that they're injured through no fault of their own, and they have an injury that is going to impact them in some way, shape, or form going forward, that they should definitely reach out to an attorney and find out what their legal rights are. And even if it turns out there's not a case that's worth pursuing, at least they'll have clarity that they'll know whether they should have acted or not acted.
Thank you, David. It's the peace of mind that you get from knowing. Knowledge is power, and the best way to get that is to get a consult. No matter what your area of law, no matter what your question is in whatever area of law, it benefits you to gain knowledge by consult. So thank you very much for joining us today, David. We appreciate your insights, and we hope you're very welcome. And we hope all our viewers will join us next month for Legal Talk, when we have David Fries of Unroot Turner Burke and Fries, who will be talking with us about estate planning matters, another aspect of money matters. So thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next month.